So, wow! I'm kind of shocked at how bad this movie is. Universal knows, though. Universal knows, which is why the embargo is lifting mere hours before the movie premieres. I don't think this is going to make $1 billion. I think it might still have a big opening weekend. I don't even know if it's going to make it to Friday. I think word of mouth on this is going to be toxic, or whatever toxic goo there is in Nintendo world that destroys stuff that it touches. So let me walk you through this, right? Because I know a lot of you aren't going to believe me, but I think you're going to be seeing a lot of bad reviews drop right now. And yeah, it's unfortunately true. Now, as I've mentioned before when discussing this movie, I don't play Nintendo games, right? Like I know who the characters are, well, like the big ones, but I'm certainly not a Nintendo fan. But, you know, just like I say movies shouldn't require homework, this should be accessible to a non-Nintendo fan, especially if it wants to make $1 billion. But, you know, I do love Illumination movies. I watch The Grinch every year. I love Illumination films. I think they're fantastic. And the trailers for this have been very bright and fun. Plus, I've been really getting into Universal Studios Super Nintendo World. Like, I haven't had a chance to go there, but I've watched all the videos. I'd like to go there. It looks like a good time. So I'm like, you know, this seems fun. You know, everybody's so excited for Super Nintendo World, for this movie, right? And who doesn't love a party? I'm like, I want to be in here too, everybody. Move over. So I was very excited for my press screening. I was like, oh boy. So there were about 40 of us in the basement of AMC Lincoln Square, and they gave us free snacks. Yummy. And it was very nice. I had a great seat, wasn't too crowded. I had like my space. I was set. I was like, oh boy. But then the movie started, and again, out of like 40 of us critics, it was a critics-only screening. The all media is tonight. It was a critics-only screening, and I would say out of 40, maybe 2 people were enjoying and laughing at the movie. They were having a good time though. Maybe you're one of those too. But the rest of us just sat there in stony silence, just waiting for the movie to end. You were like, oh, whew. I mean, I also was not only not enjoying it, but I was shocked that I couldn't get into the movie. I was like, how is this bad? I haven't had this hard a time watching a movie since DC Super Pets. I would describe both of these movies as torture to sit through. Whew, and I like comic books, I like mythology, I get into stuff. I'm open to getting into new fandoms. So the fact that I was like, make it stop, was pretty bad. Although I wanted to walk out of DC Super Pets, as I told you. And the only reason I stayed was because, again, I'm reviewing it. I'd love to be able to say, hey, it gets really good. Narrator, it does not. And also the visuals here were pretty good. And I really like Anya Taylor Joy's Princess Peach and Seth Rogen's Donkey Kong. So, it wasn't quite as bad as Super Pets, but it was close. It was bad. But speaking of the amazing visuals, Super Mario Brothers is available in 3D. And if you like 3D and you're willing to pay a couple extra bucks for it, you might want to consider it. Also, maybe as a safety net, because the movie's so bad, at least you'll have peak visuals. Particularly the Mario Kart sequences. When I was watching those, I was like, wow, I bet these would look pretty good in 3D. I mean, I think the movie's actually been made to be seen in 3D. I think they should be advertising that more. Like the rainbow road gets all swirly, and then the camera starts swirling, and you're like, oh, this is cool. And I did feel, I was like, oh, why aren't I watching this in 3D? Now, as I said, I've been able to get into other mythologies, but I just couldn't get into this movie despite being a ready and willing participant. I was like, come on, Nintendo World, indoctrinate me. So I thought about it, and I saw it last night, and I've been like, why couldn't I get into this movie? And this morning, eureka, it clicked, and I realized the problem. The Super Mario Brothers movie, this latest one, they did the live action one many years ago. But while this is supposed to be an origin story where Mario and Luigi do discover the Mushroom Kingdom for the very first time, I didn't even know it was called the Mushroom Kingdom. I had to look it up. It's not even made clear in the movie. But the movie is written for fans and fans only. Nothing is explained to the audience. Not the world, not the characters, not the circumstances, and not even really the point. Now, some of you might be like, good, I'm a fan and I just want to get to it. I mean, there's nothing to get to, but, a good screenwriter, screenwriting, it's always been disrespected in Hollywood, but this is it's at its lowest point right now. Like a good screenwriter can make this fun for everyone, right? This is like Nintendo Easter egg the movie, the opposite of Andor. This is just all Easter eggs. You just choke on them. It's too much candy. After a brief opening, which is very Illumination, it seems more Illumination than Nintendo, you could be watching a scene from Sing or Secret Life of Pets, quite frankly. But then after that, there's like no story. Well, and what little story they do have, I found a couple of things. One was confusing. Like, why don't any of the other humans look like Mario and his family? And why is the human world super realistic, yet full of cartoon-looking characters? I was like, that's weird. The animation, though, again, is stunning. And some of the backgrounds in the human world looked almost real. But again, that was so bizarre that there were cartoons running around in there. Back to the story, I would also say it's a little disturbing. Because apparently in the games, Bowser, I had to look it up, Bowser is obsessed with Princess Peach and has been for a very long time. But in today's marketplace, post-Me Too, to hear Bowser declare that he's going to ask Princess Peach to marry him, which apparently isn't a spoiler because I looked it up and it happens in the games all the time, but he's like, I'm going to ask Princess Peach to marry me, and like his little sycophant sorcerer is like, what if she doesn't want to? And he's like, then I'll destroy her kingdom and kill everyone she knows. And you're like, wow, that's stalker behavior. And I would say, kind of makes this not appropriate for children, quite frankly. And I would argue that most of the movie is about who's going to date Princess Peach. And that's it. My jaw was on the floor. I'm like, is that really what this movie is about? That is a really outdated story. I think fans and just moviegoers in general, and everybody associated with this film, deserve more. And it's a shame because Jack Black does a fantastic job as Bowser. You can't even recognize that it's Jack Black's voice. Then Bowser sings and you're like, oh yeah, he's voiced by Jack Black. And you still can't tell that it's Jack Black. And I think that the talent is definitely here. It's really just the script. So Jack Black was fantastic. Also, in an effort to move away from speaking of disturbing, I would also classify this movie as a little offensive because instead of doing the Italian accents, ironically because they were worried about being offensive, instead they decided to give everyone a variation of a New York accent, which again I found kind of offensive. It's like everyone's either in Goodfellas or a Woody Allen movie. And not just in the New York scenes, by the way. Mario and Luigi live in New York City. But you're like, when you get to the Mushroom Kingdom, Donkey Kong Land is the same way. And so you're just kind of like, why would you make that choice? Like, why do you think that's somehow not offensive and the Italian thing would be? It's just crazy. The movie also leans really heavily on classic hit songs, a little bit the way Guardians of the Galaxy has done. And sometimes it gets your blood pumping. It's not a bad strategy. But here it's very poorly executed. Like everything, just when you're like, okay, now we're cooking, it peters out. And they're like, okay, we're done. And you're like, oh, you promised me a fun jam. Like when they start to make the Mario Karts and one of the Kongs is like puts on his shades and he's like, what do you want me to do for you? But he just says it with a nod and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it seems like it's going to be awesome. The music starts, they turn up the volume and then they're done. And I was like, I guess if you've ever built your own Mario Kart, you'd be like, oh, cool, it's just like the game. But as someone who has never built a Mario Kart, I still have not had the pleasure of the experience. But I did really like Anya Taylor Joy. She is always a delight as an actress on screen, but it turns out she has a great voice for animation as well. And she's a great sport. Look what she wore to the premiere for the movie, a variation on Princess Peach's Mario Kart outfit. I thought that was great. I am a little tired, though, of girl power for the sake of girl power characters. Like, if you're not going to fully develop them, I just get frustrated because I know certain groups are going to complain. You should have justification for things. It's like if you're not going to do it right, don't do it. And again, she's all girl power, but yet the movie is just about who she's going to date. She's a princess in name only. I didn't see her make any rules or control the kingdom or anything. You know, she just kind of went on a date with Mario and Bowser was really jealous about it. And you're like, is this really what this movie is about? Keegan-Michael Key's voice is also unrecognizable as Toad, which is a shame. I love Keegan-Michael Key. But Toad is adorable, and he serves as a good ad for his new restaurant at Universal Studios. In fact, I wish he'd done more cooking. I was like, oh, that's why he has a restaurant. That's great. That's awesome. What are you making? There was one quick moment where I can't do a spoiler review for this movie because I still can't really tell you what happened in it. But there was like one distraction and I felt like they didn't even do that right. I was like, tell them that there's good food back there, Mario. Why do you be like, hey, he's cooking up something back there. I was like, yeah, that's clearly the move. All right, so speaking of Mario, how's Chris Pratt? Everybody wants to know, how's Chris Pratt? Well, he's doing a thick New York accent, so he doesn't sound too much like Chris Pratt. I mean, occasionally you're like, there he is. And Chris Pratt, by the way, outside of the controversy that surrounds him, he's a very good actor, a very likable actor, and he does a good job in that regard with, the emotion and all that stuff. He certainly is able to deliver in that capacity. But again, the script is so awful. Mario and Luigi's relationship just seems really forced. It's like screenwriter Matthew Fogel, who should never work again, he's done a couple of stuff for Illumination, that's about it. It's like he saw Frozen and decided to do the male version of Elsa and Anna, but none of the work to make it work. And since they insisted on putting Mario in the real world, so to speak, why do he and Luigi wear those funny outfits and gloves? I was like, you guys look ridiculous. I mean, none of it made sense. Nothing in the movie made sense, so it was hard for me to get into any of it. Speaking of Mario and Luigi, though, Charles Martinet, he had a nice cameo. He is the OG and current voice of Mario and Luigi in the games, and a lot of fans were disappointed he's not voicing them here. But even I was like, that's Charles Martinet. That's awesome. And I think it was a very nice thing to do for him. He showed up, I think, twice. He showed up like twice. Very, very briefly, but it was cute. Even the action sequences aren't that exciting. There's like no suspense. It's just like, oh, hey, look, it's like the game. But you never really feel like you're running any of the gauntlets yourself. You still look like you're watching the game screen instead of being put into the action. That's the whole benefit of making it a movie. And then when could Mario turn into a cat? I guess like if you're into furries, that works. And maybe that'll play really well in Asian markets. I know they love cats over there, like love cats. But I just felt it robbed Mario of a lot of his personal dignity. I was like, don't do that to Mario. Where's Mario's agent? There are also 2 end credit scenes, but they're not really noteworthy. One's comedic. The second one tries to set up a potential sequel. They're like, if we make another one of these, this character's going to show up. Get excited. But that character kind of showed up earlier in the film in the background in a way, like at least a variation of them. I spotted him. And this end credit scene is so quick that it's hard to get super excited unless you're just so excited about that character. Just like the mere tease or mention or like blip of him is enough. So yeah, this is a mess. There's no story. Nothing is explained to newbies like myself. It's kind of offensive, and none of the animation styles fit together because I guess maybe they're different games. I mean, I guess it looks this way in Mario Kart, right? But from a story perspective, it just did not work for me. I have never seen an Illumination misfire this bad. In fact, I don't think they've ever misfired. This is not only the worst movie they've ever made, but in my opinion, the only bad movie they've ever made. And maybe what's different here, it's because Nintendo was so involved creatively, as you can see from the credits when you watch the movie. I guess it doesn't always work out like with The Last of Us. So that's my review of Super Mario Brothers. If you aren't a fan of the games, you've been warned. But maybe you need to go with somebody who is a Nintendo fan. It's going to be rough for you. I pity you. But just remember what good friend you're being. And maybe before the movie starts, ask your Nintendo fan friend to explain some of this stuff to you, which might make it a little less painful. But I'll be honest with you, I don't even really think your Nintendo fan friend is going to like this. All right, so share your thoughts down below. Subscribe. I know a lot of you are going to have to see this to believe it, but I think most people are not going to. I think it's going to be like my screening. 2 out of the 40 really had a good time. And I don't know if they loved it even, but at least they were laughing and reacting. All right, so share your thoughts down below. Subscribe. I don't even know if kids, again, I don't even know if it's appropriate for kids, quite frankly. All right, share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.